the XS Noize Podcast with Mark Miller.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 44 of the XS Noize Music Podcast. Thanks for downloading. This week I'm handing over the reins for this episode to XS Noize writer Lee Campbell. Lee is talking to Manchester's LoneLady about her third album, Former Things. If you missed last week's episode, I was joined by AJ, Tara and Chess from the Wandering Hearts. We talked about their fantastic self-titled second album and much more. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, it would be amazing if you subscribed and told your friends. If you want up-to-date music news, album reviews and interviews, then check out our main website at xsnoize.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. Here's XS Noize writer Dan Lynch with some highlights of what's on the website this week.
In the reviews section, Laurie Gava gives the new Garbage album an 8 out of 10 score. She says the lyrics on No Gods, No Masters are an audacious commentary on the world's condition, while musically it covers hard industrial, frenetic pop, new wave and more. A must listen for Garbage fans. Sticking with reviews, and Aaron Kavanagh says the new album from Sleater-Kinney is confidently produced and packed with melancholy and conviction. On Path to Wellness, the band sheds its Riot Girl roots for a cleaner brand of alt-rock. Aaron gives the album 7 out of 10. Sean Crossy's On the Turntable pick this week is the second album from soul hip-hop duo Balance. Sean says Children of Zeus is the sound of summer, with perfectly produced, laid-back, heavy grooves. Read more at xsnoize.com.
Judy Campbell, also known as LoneLady, releases Former Things, her third album, on June 25th. Former Things is the follow-up to her acclaimed 2015 album, Hinterland. Lee Campbell caught up with Julie to talk all about the new album. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Music Podcast with LoneLady.
Congratulations on the imminent release of a new album, Former Things.
Thank you.
The album has had a long journey going back as far as 2016.
Yeah.
How does it actually feel being able to finally release it in 2021?
I felt like that day would never come, to be honest, because initially the first sort of 18 months I was writing it in Somerset House in London, and that was a lot of fun and that was great. And then when that residency ended, I came back up to Manchester and everything just kind of hit a rocky patch, really. So it was a really difficult last couple of years to get this thing to the finish line. And when I had a box of vinyl copies delivered to my home not so long ago, it was, a real moment to actually see it in the flesh for the first time and hold it, So I was quite sort of overwhelmed at that point, really, in a good way.
In a good way, yeah, I can imagine. And for this one, you've put the guitar aside to a certain extent on the LP, and why the change in direction in your music with a much more synthesized feel on this one?
Normally, I write with a drum machine and my guitar, and that's how it's kind of been for quite a while. And I think I just had a real sort of yearning to get my hands on some old school electronic hardware. And so when the opportunity to join the studios at Somerset House came up, it was just a great opportunity to kind of change things up a bit, set up a new studio, new equipment, new processes, a new city. I think you do have to change, freshen your approach. I couldn't write Hinterland again, even if I wanted to. And it was just great because I've always loved kind of electro textures and sounds and things. For me, this album's musically, it's like going back to being a kid, really, because that was a lot of the first music that I was hearing as a kid, like maybe on soundtracks, like Beverly Hills Cop or things like that. Just for all those electro type textures that were just, I loved them then, and I love them now. And so it was just great to be able to, embrace all that stuff and really fun with the hardware, you know.
You talk about the 80s, you can really hear that coming through in the album, and it sort of reminded me of, like, I grew up in a similar era, I guess, and it reminds me of some. Do you remember the old Shep Pettibone remixes? And he, the producer, and he used to remix so many different people, and with that sort of beat in the background, and it's sort of reminded me a little bit of that, you know.
Yeah, I probably heard that stuff was filtering through, I think, as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the things I was hearing as a kid that I didn't know what they were. Like, I didn't know I was hearing Herbie Hancock or whatever. But I remember that really weird video, you know, Rocket and things like that. So, yeah, it's sort of imprinted on my memory, really. So to me, it's not, this album isn't a departure as such. It's actually going back, stuff that I heard as a really little kid, you know.
And it's just, you've already touched on it, but you moved from the outskirts of Manchester to London's Somerset house to kickstart this project. It's quite a shift in environments. What brought about this move in the first place, and why that particular part of central London?
I like travelling. I actually like, you know, I get a bit restless stuck in one place. And I think with Hinterland, I'd really immersed myself in my home city and all the areas I grew up in, and you know, I really needed a change. And it was actually just, you know, luck really that the director of Somerset House Studios, Marie McPartlin, got in touch really and invited me to become a member of the studios, you know, after meetings with her. And then I also got an arts council funding to help with the move and the setup costs and everything. So because setting up in the room that I eventually set my studio up in, it was all a big upheaval, definitely, but it was an exciting one, and it was definitely time for a change.
The title track of the album, it's one of my favourite songs on the LP. Could you tell us a little bit about the origin and theme of that particular song?
Again, like all of the tracks on the album, I wrote that with the Dopefer analog sequencer. That was the thing that replaced the guitar really as a writing tool. Yeah, so that began with synths, samplers and drum machines hooked up to the sequencer. And like a lot of the tracks, it started off as quite a hard-edged sounding thing. And over time, that particular track softened as I sort of layered it up, and just became a bit, and especially when the sort of lyrics and vocal line was emerging, the whole thing became a lot softer and more sort of vulnerable, and lyrically it's the heart of the record in a sense, because it encapsulates the main themes of reflecting on that sort of golden age of childhood and feeling really, you know, mourning that really.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a kind of sadness in that song that's kind of like a, you know, in my mind, it's a very Super 8 kind of tinted with the kind of golden age of childhood. And so as well, weirdly, I'd been listening a little bit to like Lana Del Rey albums.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd come really late to her stuff, but I really got into it, that kind of whole widescreen kind of sound that she has, and a kind of woozy sadness that's in her music. I think that definitely rubbed off a little bit, actually. There's a few kind of soft guitar licks, just simple melodies that creep in there and just soften the edges a little bit in that song. But it's very much about, mourning, and it's a very, you know, reflective, sad song. Yeah.
Your music has often been described as an extension of Manchester itself. Why do you think the Manchester cityscape comes through so much in your songs?
I think really it's just sort of, I think lots of things, you know, blend together to make you who you are as an artist and as a person. And I think it's just a kind of, lots of different things filter into, you know, a lot of my time, especially for Hinterland, you know, as I talked about with that album, I spent a lot of time walking around the outskirts and certain kind of rundown spaces. And I find that I always gravitate towards writing about my environment, and rather than say a love song about another person, for example, I think that's just where the kind of spaces and architecture and of Manchester really seep deep into my DNA. And I think as well, I'm a kind of romantic in that sort of romantic poetry type sense, kind of like the idea of wandering around in ruins, daydreaming, really. Yeah, I think like this album's moved away from that though, musically and lyrically.
Just talking about architecture and building and environments, do you have a favourite building in Manchester, past or present?
It's funny, I just like the places that are on the outskirts that are a bit raggedy,
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm from East Manchester, and I think there's quite a lot of East Manchester that's still quite untouched and a bit unfashionable. So places like Miles Platting or Gorton, out into Openshaw, further out into East Manchester. I really like the kind of industrial estates and red brick walls. But I think it's rather than specific buildings, it's more these kind of weedy outskirts, that I find kind of quite stimulating in a weird way.
Well, there's something very unusual about those environments for sure. It's hard to put your finger on it. Your song, Not Great Men, features on the tribute album The Gang of Four and Andy Gill, Problem of Leisure, which was released recently. And you play alongside the likes of Dandy Warhols, Gary Newman and Tom Morello. How did that involvement come about? And did Gang of Four shape your music in any way?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Gang of Four Entertainment is a massive influence on me, and Andy Gill, is a total guitar hero of mine. Had a huge so that's a real honour for me to be on that record. I'd supported them back in around 2015, I think it was.
Okay.
And so I'd met him then, and really got very warm memories of that meeting. He saw me in the downstairs area of the venue we were playing at and darted over to me and enthusiastically shook my hand and said, "I love your stuff." And so, oh, that's my line, And then after the gig, I got him to sign one of my guitars, and yeah, it's it's a special, definitely thing for me. And then later on down the line, I was approached to contribute a cover, which was it was a very special, joyful thing. And so he and I had email communication about that. And once I'd sent the mix on, he sent me an email back about, saying how much he liked it and stuff. And then when he passed away, it was a shock. And obviously the release was always a celebration of Gang of Four, and obviously it's taken on a bit extra bittersweet kind of tone to it as well. But it's a full, it is humbling to be part of that kind of legacy, that celebration release. Yeah, really special thing for me.
Yeah, like I suppose I didn't realise the depth of impact that Andy Gill and Gang of Four had on so many artists until I started, diving a bit more into it,
I feel like to me that it's a massive cultural moment, that album, and I'm not quite. I feel like it should be more broadly celebrated, but it's quite nice to have it as a sort of cult, iconic cult record, which is what it is. You do see the influence of their style so often. Any kind of angular guitar playing can be traced back to Gang of Four for sure.
Julie, another brilliant track on your new album is Fear Colours, and I can hear so many shades of New Order's Technique or Low Life on that song. The lyrics include the line, "Wherever fear goes, I go." Can you recall when you wrote this and what you were thinking at the time?
Yeah, I mean, this song, it's the only song on the album that actually began life, earlier. So I'd actually done wrote this main riff on an ARP 2600 back in Michigan, funnily enough, when I was finishing off Hinterland. So the actual raw sketch of that was quite old, but it during my time at Somerset House, I sort of reworked it into what you hear now. So yeah, it's definitely, I really had fun with that one. Just, I love that whole kind of Arthur Baker confusion vibe. And use vocoder on there as well. It was having fun with those electro textures, really.
And what about the actual lyrics of the song, Julie? What sort of inspired those, or what's the story you're telling in that one?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of, like a lot of lyrics on the record, it's just really interior, internalized fear, and just a constant sense of dread and inner turbulence, really. So, wherever fear goes, I go. It's all that kind of turbulence in your own mind, really, is something that I feel sometimes, it's hard to get away from it. And the little lo-fi video we did was just, driving around the streets of, these industrial streets in Manchester, and that feeling of being pursued, pursued by your own demons, really, the lyrics are about.
The first time I actually heard your material, Julie, was on the Ian Curtis 40th birthday special hosted by Dave Haslam back in, I think it was May last year during lockdown. And you played Flea.
Yeah.
And I found it totally compelling. I thought it was brilliant. Parts of it reminded me of Joy Division's Shadow Play, and the sort of urban images that conjures up, What do you have a favourite Joy Division track, and why? And if you do, why do you think that is?
I mean, I love Joy Division, and I love Martin Hannett's production, and I'm absolutely enchanted by everything about Joy Division, the sleeve art, and I used to have the Unknown Pleasures poster on my wall for a really long time, and everything about their music and their imagery is just really hypnotic. It's God, you know what? It's impossible.
Yeah, it's difficult to pick. It's probably a difficult question. It's very hard to pick one tune. But have you had a chance to work with any of the New Order guys on any material?
Not on any material, but I did support New Order twice. So obviously really wonderful to meet them. I remember especially being on stage during their sound check, and they would suddenly sound check, the riff from Transmission or something, or the chords that ring out, and then the solo, and to be actually on stage while they're on stage sound checking, that was my heart was beating very fast.
I can imagine. Must have been crazy.
I would love to, I mean, I'm here. I hope they call me up sometime.
Yeah, I love your lyric on Treasure. I think it's "Don't let me disappear into the ever forever." Can you tell us a bit about that track also? Yeah,
I mean, I it's funny, like all the music and the lyrics are almost in direct contrast to each other, and the lyrics are like super, the music's super upbeat and up tempo and bright and punchy, but the lyrics kind of do the opposite of that, really. And I think I've just been really, like previously I've kind of buried things a bit in poetic imagery, but this time I've just been a bit more blunt, I think, about how I feel, and I've really just poured a lot of kind of anxiety and just emotion into the record, really. And, in Treasure, again, I'm sort of a bit like Former Things. I'm kind of sort of asking, is there still treasure to be found? And whatever your treasure is, personally, whatever gives you meaning in your life. And, that's what treasure is. And I suppose I'm asking the ever, really. I'm asking the guy what's out there, is, because I kind of need something,
No,
so
it's a brilliant.
A lot of that throughout the album, really.
Yeah. And later in the year, it's great to see that you're embarking on a tour. And exciting to hear that you're going to be playing Belfast and Dublin in October as well.
Can't wait. I mean, I love traveling. I love touring, and really, and I love, I love visiting places, and I've really missed getting out and about.
Is that going to be your first time playing live in Ireland as your own headlining set?
I played Dublin quite a long time ago, but yeah, it's been a while since then. So yeah, really happy to be coming over.
And first time in Belfast?
Yeah.
Great. I'm sure you get well looked after and you'll get a good reception. Just talking about live shows, just a couple more questions. Who are you looking forward to seeing play live this year or next year? Any particular bands that you would jump at the chance of going to see live?
Well, it's not a new band, but it's a band that I got really stuck into during lockdown, and I would love to go and see Underworld, basically. You know, like a lot of people, been very cooped up, and I would love nothing more than to let loose in a big room to Underworld. So the first time, if they put some tickets on sale, I'm there, definitely. And
then just the last question to wrap up: do you have any dream collaborations on your wish list, that artists that you respect and that you'd like to team up with?
You know, I always stumble on that question because you know, I work alone so much, so it's actual. I don't know. It's for my own stuff. I just love working on it myself. So I don't. You know, I always stumble on that question, to be honest.
Julia, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and you know, best of luck for the new LoneLady album, which I think it's out on the 25th of June. So, you know, best of luck with that, and also with the tour. I'm really looking forward to coming over. Yeah, so it'll be great to see artists getting out on the road again. All right, thanks, Lee. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
The XS Noize Podcast with Mark Miller.